Hello. In this paper, we shall be looking at the proposed memorandum. For paper 1 mathematics, we shall use a copy of the Johannesburg West paper that was written. Okay, so instructions, we have 7 questions that we're going to be working with. We need to use the appropriate calculators approved and then rounding off to 2 decimals, okay? Neat handwriting is also of your advantage. All right, then question number 1. If you're given M to be this side, explain why M cannot be undefined for any values of X. So the explanation for us is that for us to have something to be undefined, number 1, the denominator must be a 0, okay? So in this case, we're going to say that the denominator is not a 0. That's why we cannot have this expression to be undefined. Then 1.1.2 determine the value or values of M for which, now it's values of X for which M will be a non-real number. So non-real number happens when we have a negative within the root sign. So what this means, since the denominator is already negative, the aim should be fighting to make sure that the numerator is positive, okay? And that can only happen if X is anything to do with a 0 or a negative. So we're going to say that X should be less or equal to 0. So it's a whole lot of numbers that we can use. So you can't list all the numbers. Just this inequality is all that is needed. And then 1.2.1, simplify the expression. So we need to open up these brackets. So 3 is going to multiply with everything here. So you're going to have 3x squared plus 3x minus 3. Negative x is going to open up with everything. So it's negative x cubed minus x squared plus x. And then we collect the like terms, meaning that we're going to have a negative x cubed. This one and this, they are like terms. So we combine, we get a positive 2x squared. And then a positive 3x and the x, we get a positive 4x. And then minus 3. But why are we having... Okay, no, it's fine. And that's what I'm getting, okay, when I open up this. So 3x squared, 3x minus 3, minus x cubed, minus x squared, and then the plus x. Okay. So that is how we would have gone about that. Then 1.2.2, you need to apply the fractions. So I'm going to multiply that, this, and that. So it's going to be 17 to x plus 1 minus 2 into 1 minus x. Everything is over 2 by 17, which is a 34. Now open up the brackets there. 17x plus 17 minus 2 plus a 2x over 34. So 17 plus 2 gives us a 19x. 17 minus 2 gives me a 15 over 34. That would be my answer. And then 1.2.3, I need to apply the laws of exponents. So break down the 4, break down the 8 into a base of 2. So that's going to be 2 squared with x plus 3 multiplied by 8 is a 2 cubed with a 1 minus x. And then that's a 2 to the x minus 9. Now, since the bases are the same, I'll go ahead and add up the exponents. Okay, so what is that going to become? Okay, so it's a 2. That's going to be a 2x plus 6 plus a 3 minus a 3x plus x minus 9. Okay, so this is a 2x plus x is 3x. When you subtract 3x, the x dies out. Then we have 6 plus 3 is a 9 minus 9, which is a 0. So I'm left with 2 to the 0, which is just a 1. Okay, then 2.1.1, they want me to factorize, so they want us to factorize this. So we're going to say that 6x squared. Okay, let's see. 6x squared minus 7x minus 3. Okay, so how do we get the product? We're going to have a 3, we're going to have a 1. And then how do we get the 6x squared? If I use, that's not going to make sense. I'm thinking of using a 2x and a 3. That's not making sense. If I use a 3 here and then a 2x here, so that's going to be 6x squared. This is going to be a 9 and then a 2, so minus and plus. So that becomes the answer, okay? So it's a 3x plus 1 and then a 2x minus 3. Okay, then 2.1.2, we have 4 terms. So with these 4 terms, we can apply the grouping. Okay, so we have this and that, this and that. So with the first bracket, it's a difference of 2 squares, meaning that we're going to have x minus z and then x plus z. But then we are adding x plus z. So let's take the x plus z out. Okay, so that is out. What are you going to be left with? We're only going to be left with x minus z and then plus 1. So that is how the factorization was supposed to be done. All right, and then 2.1.3, this is a sum of 2 cubes. So the sum of 2 cubes, we get the cube root of 8, which is a 2x, okay, plus 1. And then we need to square the first term, which is going to be 4x squared minus the product of these two, which is a 2x, and then 1 squared gives us a 1. And 2.2.2, they want us to solve for x in each of the following. So the product here equated to that. So open up the brackets. We open up the brackets. This is going to be x and 2 is going to be a 2x minus x squared minus 6 plus 3x. I'll say plus 2x is equal to 0. I have to move this 2 to that side, becomes a positive. Then when I simplify, I have negative x squared. The 3, the 2 is a 5, plus that is a 7. And then I have a minus 6 is equal to 0. Then I'm going to divide through by negative so that I end up with a positive x squared minus 7x plus 6 is equal to 0. And then when I open up, that's going to be x minus 6, x minus 1. Meaning that this bracket gives me x as a 6, or this bracket gives me x as a 1. Okay, so that is how I would have claimed the 4 marks. And then 2.2.2, we have what we call the exponential equations. So with this exponential, all we need to do is break down this. Okay. Okay, so that's going to be, I'll say 3 to the 3x. Is it a minus 1? Yes, and then minus 27 to the x. This should give us negative 18. Okay, so we break this down. We're going to have a 3 to the 3x, a 3 to the negative 1, minus, we know that 27 is going to be the same as 3 cubed with x is equal to negative 18. Let's factor out the 3 to the 3x. We know that 3 to the negative 1 is the same as a third. We are subtracting a 1 is equal to negative 18. And then we know that a third minus 1 is going to give us negative 2/3. Okay, is equal to negative 18. Then divide both sides by negative 2/3. So that's like having 18 multiplied by 3 divided by 2, which gives me a 27, meaning that 3 to the 3x gives us a positive 27. Break down the 27 also. So 3 to the 3x is the same as 3 cubed. Drop the bases. 3x is 3, meaning that our x is just a 1. All right, so that is how you claim most of the formats. And then 2.2.3, which is the inequality. Start by getting rid of the 3, multiply through by 3, meaning that we're going to have a negative 9 is less 2x minus 1 is less a negative 3. Let's transpose the 1 to either sides, end up with a negative 8 is equal to is less 2x is less negative 2, and then divide through by 2. That's going to give us a negative 4 less x less negative 1. And then that becomes the solution. And then 2.3, they want us to solve for x and k, no more x and y. Okay, so there are two ways of doing this, either the elimination or the substitution. So if I use the elimination, this is going to be x plus 2k. I'll equate to 10. Call that equation 1. And then I get 7x minus 3k is equal to 19. I'll call that equation number 2. And then since I want to eliminate, I'll see this is a 7, that's a 1. Let me multiply this entire thing by 7. So that I have 7x plus 14k is equal to 70. That is equation number 3. Then I can now subtract equation 2 and equation 3. So that is 0 minus 3 minus 14 gives me minus 17k. And then 19 minus 70, which gives me negative 51. Then I'll divide both sides by negative 17, negative 17. Okay. My answer becomes a positive 3 for k. Then I'll get this k3 and then substitute it by the top part. So I'll have x plus 2 times 3 is equal to 10. So x plus 6 is 10. Move the 6, meaning that x is going to be just a 4. Okay, and then question number 3, which is the number pattern, telling us that given the linear pattern of negative 106, negative 96, negative 90, determine the general term. So what we can see is that for us to move from the first term to the next one, it's like we are adding. Okay, so if I get 98 minus 106, I'm having a positive 8. Okay, a positive 8 across, meaning that our Tn is going to be 8n. Okay, what's 106 plus 8? It's going to be 114, so minus 114. So that is what I'm ending up with. Okay, so that is the general term, and then they want us to get the 60th term, so meaning that T60 is going to be 8 times 60 minus 114. So 8 by 60 minus 114 gives me 366. And then which term will be the first to be positive? So for a term to be positive, it means that it's greater than 0. Okay, so what we do here, somebody can continue to, continue with the addition and get the answer. Or you can just tell us that 8n minus 114 should be greater than 0. And then we solve this. So meaning that 8n should be greater than 114. Divide both sides by 8. So 8n must be, so 114 divided by 8 gives me 14,25. Okay, so meaning that the 15th term. So T15 will be the first one to be positive. Okay, you can try it and see what is 8 times 14 minus 114. We get a negative 2. Okay, but if we use now 15, that's when we're gonna get a positive answer. And then 3.2, they want us to determine the value of x if this is a linear pattern. So 2x minus 43. Okay, so 2x minus 43. And then this is 5x minus 59. And then this is a 3x minus 40. Okay, so we need to find this difference, we need to find that difference, and then equate the two. So we know that 5x minus 2x will be a 3x, minus 59 minus minus. So it's like a minus 59 plus a 43, which gives me negative 16. Then I'll do the same thing, 3x minus 5x is a negative 2x, and then minus 40 minus minus 59, so it's 59 minus 40, which is a plus 19. Now, since it's a linear pattern, these two differences have to be the same. So collect the like terms. We shall have a 19 plus a 16. So 5x, 19 plus a 16 gives me a 35. Then divide both sides by 5, meaning that x is a 7. Okay. And then they're telling you just to write down the numerical values of the first three terms if x is a 7, which we just proved. Meaning that 2 times 7 is 14. 14 minus 43 gives us a negative 29. And then if we have 5 times 7 minus 59 is a negative 24. And then 3 times 7 minus 14 is a negative 19. So those are the terms that we have. Then explain in your own words why the pattern will also contain positive numbers. So the only explanation we see is this pattern is infinite. In other words, it's not ending, but also it is increasing. Okay, it is increasing, moving from a small part to a bigger. So we are starting from a negative 29, moving to the positive part or moving to the right. Okay. Question number 4, we are given this function. We know that this is a hyperbola. And then they're asking us to write down the equation of the horizontal asymptote. So when you're talking about horizontal, it's this 4. Okay, so y is equal to 4. And then determine the coordinates of the x-intercept. So we know that for the x-intercept, y must be a 0. So you need to replace y with a 0 and move this entire thing that side. So it's going to be 2 over x is equal to 4. And then cross multiply, meaning that 2 is 4x, and then make x the subject. So x becomes a half. Since they want the coordinates, so it's going to be a half and 0. Okay, and then they want us to do the sketching. Okay, so 4.1.3, we need to sketch the graph of f. So knowing that this is a hyperbola, we start with the y-axis, and then we have our x-axis, and then we say the x-intercept is a half, which I can put somewhere there. And then we say that the asymptote was y is equal to positive 4. Okay, so I'll imagine my positive 4 is somewhere there. Okay, and then what is the other, what's the y-intercept? So we need to, do we need the y-intercept? No, we don't need it. When we look at the a value, it's a negative, meaning that we're looking at quadrant 2 and then quadrant number 4. So meaning that we're gonna have our graph in this sort of pattern. Okay, this should be a curve. I don't know why my graph is moving otherwise. Okay, let's do this. Okay, so saying this in that direction, And then we're going to have this arm in that sort of direction. So that is our graph. Okay, then 4.1.4, write down the domain. So when you're writing the domain, remember domain refers to the x values, or the input values. So we know that x should be an element of real numbers, but x should not be equivalent to 0. So that is the domain for all hyperbolas, in grade 10. 4.1.5, determine the equation of G if G is formed by shifting F 7 units downwards, meaning that the negative 2 over x plus 4, when you move it 7 units downwards, it's like you're subtracting a 7. So the final equation should be 2 over x. It's going to be a minus 3. So that's going to be the G of x. That is what the question is asking for. All right, then 4.2, we are given h of x, which is a to the x plus a q, and it's passing through 2 and a 2. And its y-intercept is a 0, -1, as shown in the diagram below. Okay, so what do they want? They want us to write down the values of a and q. So where do we start from? We have 2 points. We can start from this 0 and -1 before we can use the 2 and the 2. Okay, so let's do the substitutions. So where there is x, I'll put a 0. Where there is y, I'll put a -1. So meaning that -1 is a to the 0 plus a q. Okay. Anything to the exponent of 0 should always reduce to a 1, then move the 1 that side, meaning that q is going to be a -2. Then I'll get this -2 and substitute it, and then I use the point 2, 2. So I would say h of x is equivalent to a to the x minus 2. Then at a point 2, 2, so 2 is equivalent to a squared minus 2. Move this to that side, it's going to be 4 is equal to a squared, and then find the square root, meaning that our a is a 2. So a is a 2, q is a -2. And then write down the equation of the asymptote. So asymptote is the dotted line, and we said that this asymptote is a -2, so y is equivalent to -2. And then the range, those are the y values. So we're seeing that this graph will only be valid after this -2. Okay, so above the -2. So we're going to say y must be greater than -2. And then determine the equation of J if J is formed by reflecting H about the y-axis. So when you reflect about the y-axis, the sign on the x must change. So meaning that our J, or we can say J of x, is going to be the A, which is a 2 to the x, I will say -x minus 2. Okay, you can also change this into something like a half to the exponent of x minus 2. This is also another alternative. All right, then question number 5, given that P of x is a parabola, okay, this parabola intersects the points Q, which is a -4, and another point R. The y-intercept of P is at A, okay, which is also the turning point as shown in the diagram. The graph intersects P at A and R. S is given as 6 and -4. They want us to get the coordinates of R. So if this is a -4, meaning that R must be a +4 and 0. Then they want us to get the equation of the line G of x. So if we have this as 4 and 0, we have S, we can find the gradient first. You know that change in y over change in x. So I'll say 0 minus -4 for the y values. So this is x and y. This is x and y, okay? Over 4 minus 6. On top, I'll have a 4. At the bottom, I'm going to have a -2. So meaning that my gradient is going to be -2. So y is equal to -2x plus c from the equation of mx plus c. And then what I need to do, I need to find the value of c. I can use this point. So where there is x, I'll put a 4. Where there is y, I'll put a 0. So -2 times 4 plus c. This becomes a negative 8. I move it that side. C becomes 8. So the equation of g of x is going to be negative 2x plus 8. All right, then they want us to get the coordinates of A. A is going to be 0 and 8 because that's the y-intercept and it's also the turning point. And then they want us to get the equation of the parabola, meaning that the P of x is going to be A. Do we know the value of A? That's what we need to look for. Okay, so we're saying P of x is ax squared plus q. So we already have the q as 8. Let's use this point negative 4 and 0. Where there is x, we put a negative 4, where there is y, we put a 0. So 0 is equal to a into negative 4 squared plus 8. Move this 8 to that side, it's going to be a negative 8. And then 4 squared, that's a 16a. Divide by 16, divide by 16, meaning that our a is negative a half. So the equation, therefore, is going to be negative a half x squared plus 8. And then write down the range. So those are y values. So y should be less or equal to the 8. Okay, so I'll say y is less or equal to 8. And then using the graphs above, determine the values of x for which p is equal to g. So p is equal to g at a point of intersection. So when x is a 0, we're seeing that the graphs are meeting. And then when x is a 4, the graphs are still meeting. So I'll say that x is a 0 or x is a 4. And then p minus g is greater than 0. So you can write this down and say that p of x is greater than g of x. Okay, when I move the g to that side. And so where do we find the graph of p to be above the g, to be above the straight line? Okay, so it's just this section. That's when the graph of, wait a minute. Yes, that's when p is above. P is the parabola. Né? So that's the only section. So between 0 and then 4. So we're going to say that 0 is less x and then less 4. And then p of x, g of x to be a negative, meaning that if p is above the x-axis, g must be below. Or if p is below, the g must be above. Okay, so let's start with the first condition, whereby the parabola is above and then the straight line is below. Parabola above, straight line below. We have a scenario like that? No. Parabola is above, while the straight line is also above in that area, okay? Meaning that the only condition that's gonna work is when the parabola is below and then the straight line is above. So parabola is below the x-axis at this point. And then from negative 4, you're seeing the straight line continues to be above, okay? So when the parabola is below, the straight line is above. So this section or this area is what we need. So x needs to be less than negative 4. Okay, so that's the answer for 5.6.3. All right, then question number 6. Isaac invested 12,000 at a rate of 14.25 per annum compound interest. How much will the investment be worth after 5 years? So with compound interest, the formula is P1 plus I to the exponent of n. So 12,000 into 1 plus 14.25 over 100 to the exponent of 5. Okay. This is 1 plus 14.25%. Okay, to the exponent of 5. That becomes 23,359.42. Sorry, it's a 43,43. Okay. And then how much interest did he earn? So interest is the difference between this value and then the original. So the 23,359.43 minus the 12,000. Okay. You subtract the 12,000, you're getting 11,359.43. And in 6.1.3, Mr. is planning to buy a motorbike after 5 years. If the bike costs this much, at what rate should he invest the 12,000 for? Okay, so we need the I, okay? So 25,476. So 25,476 is our A. Our P is the 12,000. Our I is what we need, but for 5 years. Okay, 25,476. Okay, so from the formula, we know that 1 plus I to the exponent of n. So this is 25,476 is equal to 12,000. 1 plus I to the 5. Divide both sides by 12,000. Okay. So when I divide both sides by 12,000, I'm getting a 2,123. That's a 1 plus I to the exponent of 5. Then I need to find the fifth root on either sides so that the 5 is cancelled. Then I'll have 1 plus I is equivalent to, so we're saying the fifth root of our answer becomes 1,1625. Okay, move the one that side. It's gonna be a 0,1625 is equal to I, then multiply by 100. Mean that our interest is 16,25%. All right, then 6.2. Tom wants to buy a TV for a price of 15,000 on hire purchase agreement. The store requires a deposit of 10% and the remaining balance to be paid in equal monthly installments at the rate of 21%. How much is the deposit? So 10 over 100 times 15,000, which should be something like 1.5. Okay. And then calculate the total amount owed if the period of the agreement is 3 years. Okay. So meaning that we need to start by finding the balance. Okay. So 15,000 minus 1.5. What do we get? 15,000 minus 1.5 gives me 13,500. And then this 13,500 is going to grow with simple interest rate. So 13,500 into 1 plus the 21% for 3 years. So 21 over 100 times 3. Okay, so we're saying 1 plus 21% times 3 years. My answer is a 22 and 5. So 22,005 rands. Okay, so that is how much we're going to have. Then determine the monthly installments. So get the 22,005 divided by how many months? It's going to be 3 times 12, which is 36. So divided by 36, which gives me 611.25 rand, 25 cents, sorry, 611 rands, 25 cents. All right, so question 7, which is the last one. The Saran school in the province has 48 teachers. Teachers were asked to make a choice in the component of LO they prefer to teach. Okay, there's a theory and there's also the sports. The following results were obtained. Okay, so 18 prefer teaching the sport part, 23 prefer the theory, 36 prefer either. Oh, okay. And then X prefer teaching both. Represent the above. Okay. So in this Venn diagram of ours, the total number of teachers must be 48. Okay. So I'll use S for sport and then T for theory. Okay, in this case, we're gonna have our sport. This is our theory. So spot, he told us that is 18. That is X for both. And then theory, he told us we have 23. Meaning that in this case, we're gonna have 18 minus X. This is a 23 minus X. But since we have 36 that prefer to teach either or, meaning that the total of the circles is a 36, and then what will be left is going to be a 12. So let's put the 12 somewhere there, okay? And then 7.1.2, calculate the value of X. So what we can do, since we already have our total of the circle, we can say that 18 minus X plus 23 minus X should be equated to 36. This cancels that. We know that 18 plus 23 gives us a 41. So we're gonna subtract it that side. So 36 minus 41, okay, what we get? Gives us a 5, which is negative. Then divide both sides by negative, so X becomes just a 5. And then 7.1.3, what is the probability that a teacher selected a random teaches neither? Okay, so for neither, we have 12. So it's going to be 12 over 48, which is 1 over 4. Okay, that is 1 over 4. And then 7.2, are telling us that events A and B are two complementary events. Event A and event B are two complementary. Probability of not A is this much. Determine the value of probability of A and B. So when events are complementary, which means they complete each other, and the total of the probabilities must be a 1. Then for us to get the probability of not B, that will be the same as 1 minus the probability of B. But then, if probability of not A is 0.35, okay, meaning that this 0.35 represents the B. So if it's not A, then it is B. If it's not B, then it is A. So either way, you can say 1 minus the 0.35, okay, 1 minus 0.35, which gives us a 0.65. So guys, that brings us to the end of the paper. There's also a formula page there, just in case you need the formulas, for example, for the simple interest, as well as the compound interest, okay? The gradient and all of that, they are all within here. All right, guys, so let's meet again when we're discussing the proposed memorandum for paper 2. For those that are still to write, we wish you all the best. Bye-bye.